In 2011, I read 60 books and graphic novels, and most of them was graphic novels, but I did read a fair number of books also. Tried doing one of these before, and it was pretty quiet, so we're going to try doing it again. In January, I read 5 books, and really only one of those was a book. That was My Lady Ludlow by Elizabeth Gaskell. But the ones, I pretty much, how I typed them was the order that I did them in. The first one was A Kidnapped Santa Claus by L. Frank Baum and Alex Robinson. L. Frank Baum, of course, wrote the Oz books, but he'd also written these other series that were about the land surrounding Oz, and one of them is the land where Santa Claus lives. And this is a story about these demons that live in a mountain on the other side of this valley where Santa Claus lives, and they're constantly trying to destroy Santa Claus. They're the enemies of Santa Claus, and there's selfishness, envy, hatred, some other one that's a weird tentacle monster, and repentance. Now, why she's with them, I don't entirely remember, but it's a graphic novel that was adapted from the book by L. Frank Baum, and it's illustrated by Alex Robinson, who I have not read very much of him. The only one that I read by him was Too Cool to Be Forgotten, about this man who is trying to quit smoking, so he goes to this hypnotherapist to hypnotize him so that he'll quit smoking, and what ends up happening is he goes back in time to when he's in high school, to the moment where he first starts smoking, where he goes to a party and he smokes it for the first time. And I just really liked that, so I was really excited to read something that was very, very different from that. And the main story in A Kidnapped Santa Claus is about this fairy named Whisk, who is a helper with Santa Claus. All of the different elves and people that work in Santa's workshop have different jobs. I think the Tooth Fairy also lives in the same valley with Santa Claus, but it's a different group of people, a different species that deals with the Tooth Fairy. So it's her being sort of a personal assistant to Santa Claus, and she is the one that finds out he's been kidnapped and ends up getting these people together to go and rescue him. And it's fun. It's not a really deep one. It's obviously intended for kids, but it's very well illustrated, and it's just a weird, very weird story that Baum wrote a long time ago. I think he wrote it. It was after he'd written the Wizard of Oz, and I think several of the Oz books, and he was taking a break from it, but he would always end up going back to it. So it would have been, the early 20th century, so probably the 19-teens, possibly. I'd have to look it up again. But that was good. Then the next two books are two trade paperbacks, that is, collections of story arcs for DMZ. It's written by Brian Wood and illustrated by Riccardo Burchielli, although there's some illustrations by Brian Wood also. And the idea with that is that the United States has been turned into a war zone. There was a civil war where it was broken up into two parts, and Manhattan is this section between two parts of the new United States. they're in this eternal civil war. It's the demilitarized zone, but it's a really scary place, and a journalist, a cameraman, gets stranded there when he's trying to go into it, which no journalist had done. So it was supposed to be this big scoop that he got this great opportunity to go work on, and then the guy who's there doing the reporting gets kidnapped, and the helicopter they were with gets blown up, and so he's stranded there, and it's basically about him trying to survive in the demilitarized zone and learning all these things about how people there are surviving when they're basically cut off from most things. They get some supplies every once in a while, but it's a really dangerous thing. You've got snipers and gangs all the time, and everything's broken up into these different factions. It's an ongoing series. I read the first two. The first one is just about him getting into the DMZ and figuring out these different groups. The second trade is more about how the two sides of the conflict are basically they're trying to use him in order to, him and the journalist that went over there, to win the war or whatever, is propaganda. And so a lot of it's about intrigue and about the abuse of the media and just how governments and militarized people will do anything to achieve their ends. So that's an interesting series. I might go back and read more of those. I haven't read Brian Wood outside of that, but he seems like he's a pretty good writer. The one that I mentioned before, My Lady Ludlow, it's not really a novella, but it's a pretty short book. It's by Elizabeth Gaskell, who was a contemporary of Charles Dickens, and she had written several books that were all put into this mini-series, Cranford, because just the book Cranford, really, there's not an entire story there. It's just a series of vignettes. It's a bunch of different things that all take place in more or less chronological order in this town called Cranford.